Uh, super excited to kick off the second day of Ethereum Shanghai 2023. Yesterday we had a very packed and starter lineup of not only like a lot of folks from Ethereum Foundation, but also the legendary investor Jim Rogers. We have a lot of entrepreneurs in the ZK field, as well as we had a very exciting discussion about AI alignment, as well as the existential risks about AI. So like really yesterday, I was really learning a lot, despite the fact that I'm trapped in Chicago by myself. And today I'm again very excited to kickstart another day of a very packed schedule. So we're going to learn about the first panel would be fully on-chain gaming, and later on we're gonna learn about Near's latest updates about composable decentralized front end, as well as Airwave's decentralized data storage. And later on, we will learn more about DID, which is Polygon's latest attempt to build its Polygon ID. We'll have a deep dive on it. So without further ado, I'm going to kickstart today's first panel, on-chain gaming panel. And a little bit introduction about myself. I am a core contributor to Firefly, which is this social media, Web3 social media aggregator incubated by Mask Network. And also I've been doing a lot of impact work and marketing, product marketing stuff for Mask Network, trying to, really push the frontier of decentralized social networks. So we know that historically, each novel computing paradigm and new technology will be invariably expanded its horizon for gaming development. And in 2020, there's this one really radical, sort of like a pie in the sky experimental game called Dark Forest, really leveraged its zero knowledge in sync with on-chain gaming mechanism, and thereby we witnessed the birthing of its very first on-chain gaming with incomplete information that's also openly extendable. So Dark Forest really gave us this impression that, oh my God, like fully on-chain gaming can be, programmed into reality. And the year of 2021, we saw the rise of Loot Project, which is again a very mind-fucking game where it rapidly became a cornerstone of a base layered IP, and again inspired countless games and derivatives to incorporate its gameplay and lore in a permissionless manner. And we also see a flourishing community sort of grew out of this Loot Project, and a few of my colleagues were deeply involved in the Loot Project from day one, such as Taylor and Casper, who was writing this amazing 10,000 words analysis about fully on-chain gaming. And fast forward to this year, 2023, we're really witnessing this like burgeoning industry, this flourishing industry of fully on-chain games and autonomous world. Although autonomous world was a notion coined last year, but I see this notion was widely accepted and discussed this year. So for every one of you, you guys are definitely the frontier, standing on the frontier of fully on-chain gaming. Can you maybe like each of you use 1 minute to give everyone a brief introduction of what you're working on and what excites you most about this fairly new industry? I think I will just queue. I'll start with Guilty Gilza because I really like your article from the Autonomous World little book.
For sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Guilty Gilza, co-founder of Topology. Right now, we are working on a fully on-chain game that borrows inspiration from Guilty Gear, Street Fighter, Tekken, and so on. Hopefully, we'll bring out to the public by July 21st, Paris. We'll see. And happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, whoever wants to take the next, Terrence and Yijia.
Sure. Hey everyone, thank you for having me. I'm Terrence. I am one of the co-founders of Cartridge and core contributor to Dojo. I got involved in the on-chain gaming space about 2 years ago when we started a project called Dope Wars, which was shortly after Loot and heavily inspired by it, and started building a fully on-chain game on top of Starknet, and have been kind of going down that rabbit hole ever since. Today, we've been this past year primarily focused on building out Dojo, which is a engine for on-chain games on top of Starknet. And we're building a few different interesting games and experiments with that we'll be announcing shortly as well.
Okay, thank you, Terrence.
Cool. I can go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Ija. I'm co-founder of Curio. Glad to be here. We are building revolutionary game, crypto native game mechanisms based on, again, I think fully on-chain, very much crypto native infra that we are both leveraging the existing as well as building our custom gaming specific modules. And our first game, we're building our first game. It's a strategy game, borrowing inspiration from just the typical strategy games you see, like Civilization, Age of Empires, but it's also wildly different. It incorporates the social building blocks that we named Treaty, and we tested earlier this year, and so look forward to it.
Okay, and I guess Love and Andy.
Yeah, hi GM everybody. Great to be here. So yeah, my journey started in on-chain gaming pretty much a week after Loot launched, when I'm one of the core contributors of Biblioteca DAO and the Dojo engine, and we started like a week after the Loot project basically, and we tried to build a mini strategy game on Arbitrum way back then, but then we quickly realized that we wanted a bit more compute and a bit more bit bigger design space, so we quickly shifted to Starknet. And but yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, we're in the DAO we're kind of experimenting with a bunch of different games right now, from grand evergreen strategy games that are going to persist forever, and more shorter ephemeral style roguelike games. Yeah, I mean, my day is consumed of experimenting with these games and experimenting with the Dojo engine with Terrence.
I see. If I'm understanding correctly, Terrence, Loaf, and Guilty Gyoza, like three of you, sort of like work more closely together, right? In terms of building the dojo ecosystem.
We've all been building on-chain games on top of Starknet for the past year or a little bit longer than that, and collaborating in different capacities.
I see. Okay. I think I want to kill Andy for the next question. I think it's really hard to not discuss inception of a full on-chain game without talking about Dark Forest. From a very, very thin idea into this radical experiment to explore blockchain scalability and usability problems. And also I've read, Gopship's thesis about, why we're using game as this low-stake experiment to explore the potential of blockchain technology. So your journey with MUD has been quite fascinating. Particularly as many in our audience for ETHShanghai might have first experienced your work through Dark Forest. Can you maybe walk us through this evolution, maybe offer us some insight into the transition from Dark Forest as a conceptual testing ground a game into this fully realized world of MUD, this gaming engine?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, very, very quick intro. I'm Andy. I mainly come from game development, actually. So I was crypto pilled by Dark Forest. And that was my first time writing smart contracts was Dark Forest, actually. So very strange introduction to crypto. I could not write a standard Web3 contract. I've only written games. So it is fun interacting with people, and I don't know what they're talking about. So I came onto Dark Forest at the, end of 2021, late 2021. So I helped run their last round. And at that point, the founder of Lattice, and I work at Lattice, I'm a core dev at Lattice, had already left Dark Forest to work on their own project, and they had forked the Dark Forest code base and started their own on-chain game from there. So we kind of were on parallel tracks. I was like heads down, just pounding out this last round of Dark Forest. They were making their own game called ZK Dungeon. And we both kind of came to the same conclusion at the same time, which is like, wow, this is really, really difficult. We would have game design ideas and it would take months for them to come to fruition. And yeah, as a game developer, that is like not why we're doing this. You know, like you want to get things in front of people as quickly as possible. You want feedback. You want to see people enjoy what you create. And the feedback cycle just wasn't there. So, I mean, we shipped the last round of Dark Forest. We got all the features in that we wanted. It was like V0.6. But after that, we were just exhausted, honestly. There was like 3 full-time developers that it took to ship that round. And we had a lot of good engagement. We had a few thousand people play in it. And the energy was there. Like the willingness to build on top of this platform was there. But even the DAOs that were building on top of it were like, they basically had full-time engineers building on top of this infrastructure. And we were saying like, yeah, there has to be a better way. So we were in a bit of a valley on the Dark Forest team after that last round. And then I got a call from Ludens who Lattice didn't exist yet. And he was like, I have a better way. I've been working on a game engine. And he got me at the perfect moment. It was at a low point. And I was like, please give me a game engine. Give me something to just ship features faster. And then, yeah, he came to New York and I met the other guys. And yeah, I mean, after coming from Dark Forest, where it would take me months to like add a small feature, I had a prototype of an on-chain game in like 2 weeks using Mud, like no problem. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm absolutely hooked. And from that point forward, all I've been doing is just prototyping and building games. So it really came from a need. Like the community was there, the people were there, they wanted to build on top of these things. We all know why on-chain games are attractive. But it's just the reality of making games is generally difficult, even with traditional technology. And if you throw crypto on top of that, it's just a recipe for disaster if you don't have a strict structure going into it.
True.
So, and we're trying to look at it as a complete vertical slice. Like we need hardware, we need software, and we need like dev tooling all working seamlessly together. And that's kind of the vision of Lattice and yeah, where we want to take on-chain gaming.
I see. It feels like a lot of bittersweet experience, you know, like as you step into crypto field as a game designer instead of, as a crypto bro, right? It seems like a very conventional route in terms of entering Web3. Wow. Impressive. And I know my colleague Casper wrote this analysis, sort of like dividing the Dark Forest army from the Loot army. And I'm not sure if this is a fair division, but I think my next question is for the Starknet folks, Love Terrence and the Guilty Gelza. Your collaboration on Dojo has been very interesting and caught a lot of people's attention. And I especially I want to appreciate the name Dojo. I love the name a lot. It's translating the concept of this into this digital and the project realm, as in Japanese it's like seems like an open platform designed to basically stimulate your biggest potential, right? To stimulate imagination, innovation, and growth. So it's really lift up the ceiling of what gaming composability and extensibility could be. So can you maybe like give us some insights of one? Why do you decide to choose Starknet as your blockchain platform? And additionally, I'm really curious about your team working dynamic, because it's such a like a the entire ecosystem of Dojo seems like a very grassroots kind of decentralized way of collaborating. So how do you all combine your unique strengths to bring Dojo to life? So maybe Loaf can go first, and then Terrace, and then Guilty Gal.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Kushuba. That was really interesting. Like I think like when we started building the game, the Realms OG game back in 21 end of 21, we were just mucking around with diamond contracts and and indexes and stuff, and it was I definitely share the sentiment. It's incredibly hard just to build one of these games because there's so many different parts to it, and they all have to work. Like the experience needs to be as good as a current game, and you have all these issues with the blockchain because it's the latency and whatnot, and so you need systems to all work so seamlessly together. And there isn't really, there wasn't really any engine back then, right? And so you just had to hack stuff together, and it took forever. And so that's kind of what we did originally, and that didn't really work. And then we, well, it kind of worked, but it was clunky and painful. And then, I mean, I'm sure the other guys have a slightly different path into Starknet. But I mean, my path actually followed Gyoza's. I saw Gyoza's physics fountain engine, and that kind of just took that Stark built me. That was my first introduction. I think that was like what, September, guilty, something like that. 21. And I remember seeing that, and then I went down the Stark rabbit hole, and I thought, in my point of view, like I see the EVM as, I think this is obviously the contentious point of view, and we all have our own philosophical points around this. In my point of view, I see the EVM as like this like incredibly like amazing, like low powered virtual machine that's great for running a very decentralized network, but it also it has a lot of constraints, and so when I kind of explored Starknet, I realized that these guys are building this alternate VM that is still compatible with the EVM, but it's it's on the next layer, and so you're not really there's a lot more design scope and where it can go, and so that kind of, and then what we've been thinking about is like, well, we want this game that we're building, and this is from day one, we want people to be able to add to this and just like expand this game forever. And so we want as much headspace as possible and the biggest design space as possible. So our thinking was, well, this new VM, this Cairo VM is where it's going to go, and then then you go down the path of ZK and whatnot, and this whole idea of basically compressing compute and just verifying it. It really is this next paradigm over the next 10 years that everyone's going to explore. So that's kind of what peeled me on Starknet, is this like EVM compatible but non EVM design scope. And then fast forward at like in October, definitely in hard part because of what the Lattice guys amazingly did with Mud. It kind of just like shook me, and I thought our approach that we were taking with our how we were building, as we kind of had like a prototype proto engine, but it was a bit clunky. And then I think we just created a group back in October, and with Gerza, Terrence, and a bunch of other Starknet teams, and we're like, let's just try and collaborate together and try to build a generalized engine in Cairo, and really leverage what its capacities are. And then now we're here, and Dojo is what it is, and evolving.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Glove covered it pretty well. I could maybe talk to a few of the specific properties of Starknet that I think like makes it particularly interesting for on-chain games. That like is one of the reasons that we like I first became quite interested in it. And I'll just mention that my journey, like I got like Stark pilled basically by this guy, Parama, who is one of like the OGs of the space and should always be mentioned in the context of on-chain games, although his focus has shifted a little bit more recently when he started building out the Roll Your Own project on top of Starknet. And actually the Roll Your Own engine, I think, is like probably the first attempt at building like a permissionally extensible on-chain universe where like it had a modular system where people could like very easily incorporate new mechanics into the games, and it was quite an interesting approach. And this is what opened my eyes to like the power of Starknet. But this was like kind of in the ice age of Starknet back in like Cairo 0, before like even events and stuff. It was like way too ambitious for the time. And I think like Starknet today is just entering the period, like the inflection point where it becomes like actually quite interesting for on-chain games. I think like generally, ZK rollups are, enable this property of like exponential increases in the amount of compute that you can put on chain. They have this magical property called recursive proofs that allows you basically to like zip, in a sense, like almost an infinite amount of compute into like a constant size proof that can be verified. And it enables like some interesting architectures around scalability for, we call it fractal scaling in the Starknet ecosystem, around layer 3s and, even client-side proving and stuff like that, that allow us to do things like, introduce private information into the games very easily, using the same language that you write smart contracts for, or like your game logic that runs on chain. You can run that same logic, in that execution is very portable. You can prove it on in the context of the shared context of a sequencer, or like locally on your laptop, or you can even have like fully provable games that don't have to run on blockchains at all, that you can like collaboratively verify with the participants into it in the that are participating in the round, for example. I think another interesting, Starknet itself is probably, was the first ZK rollup to market. It's probably even today the most production ready one that people can actually write interesting things and deploy to. It introduced a new language called Cairo, which I think like took a lot of learning lessons from Solidity and Ethereum, and incorporated them into the language. And it's like designed for complex applications right from the get-go. Whereas I think like Solidity, being designed for the context of Ethereum, where it was very compute and state bound, like was designed for just much simpler applications. So you have like Cairo, which is very similar to Rust, that lends itself well to building complex applications such as games. And has helped a lot in being able to express these like very complex systems. And then you have like other things that are interesting about Starknet. For example, like it uses state diffs to checkpoint state to the layers below it, which allows you to have this property of basically like temporal compression. So if you have like very high throughput activity on the layer above, and it's modifying, for example, like the position of a player, right? Like if you have a layer 2, for example, that's checkpointing to a layer 1 every hour, and inside of that hour you have an X and Y coordinate of a player, and that's changing like 1,000 times. You end up only playing for like 2 like storage slots, like if there, if it was like 2 bytes 32, so for example. Whereas like with optimistic rollups and those and approaches that aren't using state diffs, you have to land all of the call data for every single transaction, every single intermediate state on layer 1. So like the cost of inheriting the security of Ethereum becomes much more expensive. And there's some other ZK EVM approaches that have these properties too, that you could in theory deploy MUD to. Yeah, I think like off the top of my head, those are some of the interesting properties. We have some like really cool stuff coming soon, which is like volition support, which is going to be really great for games. It's the ability to choose like different data availability solutions for your game based on the properties that you want. So for example, you can have some state living on Ethereum and some other state living on like, Celestia or some other data availability solution. And there's a really exciting project that's going to be landing soon, which basically allows for native execution of programs running Cairo. So you can, start to push it to, you can start to execute Cairo logic or smart contracts at, similar performance to like native languages like Rust and stuff like that. So these are all like super exciting developments in the space. And one of the reasons why we think Starknet is a great platform and a great target for on-chain games.
Thank you, Terrence. And then Gelze?
Sure. First, I want to come clean by saying topology has not been contributing to the Dojo project as much as it wanted. The primary reason is that we have been really heads down trying to explore game design. So like a few days ago, Will Robinson and I had a talk, and we talk about game design patterns and constraints. And I think Mud and Dojo has done a extremely good job of lowering the threshold, the entry barrier for people to start making games or even just any applications that involves the blockchain at all. And I think that we're slowly onto the next phase, which is the inescapable problem of what to design. What's a good design? So now, given all the tool sets, what should we design? And I think that's the really exciting part, right? The reason why you make tools is because you want to spend more time designing the actual game and have fun iterating the games. So I think we're sort of moving into that phase now. And topology has been obsessively in that space since 2021. So we've been running physics experiments October 2021 in Cairo. So we started with rigid body colliding with each other, detecting how they overlap and handling their collision. Because we thought, hey, if we want to run video games on the blockchain, all video games that I play that interest me have physics engine as part of it. So we got to handle collision. That's the most basics of the basics in physics. And then moving to 2022, we started to make tiny game experiments, I would say tech demos that involve 2D rigid body physics simulations, such as like a billiard board game. And also we did a planetary simulation game called Isaac. And it kind of failed miserably because of multiple reasons, project complexity, TPS issue, and so on and so forth. But we've gone a long way. And I think that one funny thing about StarkNet that allows us to get really heads down and do our stuff is that it's a really strange space. I think it's a space that is really new, and it allows unorthodox ideas to develop without much peer pressure. So we can stay crazy. And I think that's what makes StarkNet kind of different from other ecosystems.
I see. And I assume like fully on-chain gaming has been StarkNet's sort of primary focus at this phase.
I think if fully on-chain game becomes a thing, StarkNet will be great. I mean, otherwise, just from StarkNet's perspective, right, it has to compete with other layer twos and try to compete with ETS, which I don't think it's a good thing to compete on, but you kind of have to compete on because of the market demand. But I think if fully on-chain games, verifiable games, sort of compute-intensive applications becomes a thing, then StarkNet can really find a niche in the a sea of layer twos and rollups.
Yeah, totally. And then I want to cue Yijia and your project Curio. So we can see both Dojo and the Mud camps already sort of appear more or less, although early, but like somehow well established and a formidable ecosystem. And how, like to your project Curio, how would you differentiate your approach from Dojo and Mud, and what kind of strategy are you intend to employ for your growth, basically?
Yeah, so I think it's helpful to give some context over this question. So my short answer to this is that I think our space is way too early for us to think about camps even. I think I would agree with Guilty Gyoza about one thing, which is that game design fundamentally drives the engine or whatever infra that is powering the game that you're building. And I would the uncomfortable truth is that right now our space has not seen a powerful game, right? Since maybe, I think everyone was excited by Dark Forest, including me, my co-founder Kevin. We started end of 2021 because we saw how powerful a game was driven by its community, right? Which is something that even very mod heavy games like EVE Online didn't quite match in terms of ratio. And then since then, so yeah, I'll talk a bit about kind of our journey as well. Basically, we saw Dark Forest. We were primarily excited by the community engagement, and we were like, oh wow, the players actually really cared about shaping the virtual worlds they engage in, right? And we looked at the plugins. There were I think around 55 at the peak of DF, and people to the ratio of probably a couple hundred, more than 1,000 players. That's a really high ratio. Now, when we took a deeper look and actually talked to some people in the ecosystem, it's very involved. We realized that most of these plugins actually are on the front end, on the client. So and that is not special to on-chain games, right? So we were thinking, okay, on-chain games is possible with DF, with the MMO strategy type of game genre. What can we do next to actually allow players to shape not only how the game look, but how it actually works under the hood, right? And I think that in spirit is kind of similar to what people call autonomous world these days, is the ability for players to actually shape the fundamental and the logic. And so the first product we actually built was we launched, I think in March or April 2022, was essentially a virtual world where any item, think of it as like a 2D Minecraft, right? Where any block is a smart contract that performs a certain piece of logic. And that logic is completely arbitrary. So for example, you're able to create a door that only whitelisted players by you can go through or open and close, right? And that was really fascinating to us. And then since then, we started asking the question, okay, but then that actually, if you allow, there's kind of a balance you have to play with between the freedom, the physical level of freedom you allow players and kind of the core of the game, including the narrative and how you actually create a shared experience for players to have them want to come here in the first place, right? You want to create a shared kind of ideology or shared narrative for the world as well. And so we built a game in July. We've always been very need focused, kind of what do players in the space actually want. So in July we built we kind of, it's our first MMO strategy game using the fully on-chain primitive. It looks a lot like the old Empire game where you have a bunch of land and ships and you basically capture the castles. And people enjoyed it. People came play. I think we got more than 100,000 transactions within just 3 weeks. So that was good. We knew that we could build on-chain games. There were a couple of problems that arose. I think a few of you, building Mud and Dojo also realized it's that for on-chain games to be easy to build at first, not even talking about performance and all that and features, right? If it's possible to build, it needs to be structured enough, and there needs to be some basic level of backend and shared data layer that unifies and simplifies the process. So actually, and by the end of that game, we also came across ECS, as a bunch of people did in the space, and we built our own version of ECS specific catered to the game we're trying to build. And then we started thinking, okay, we have this on-chain game. How can we now actually add the components and add elements that are actually crypto native, right? The crypto native gameplay. And that has increasingly become, I think, Curio's focused and specific take in the space. And we realized one thing, which is instead of physical composability, what if we allow players to be socially free to create any agreements that are enforced by the blockchain, by the game? And what that means is, Minecraft is really successful in introducing a general block that can be anywhere in the world and can construct the lore and the gameplay. We created this thing called Treaty, which it's essentially a smart contract that's social, that any two players or multiple players can sign. And for example, lend you 3 gold tokens for 5 turns, and then you have to pay me back 5 gold at the end. Or for example, a non-aggression pack. All of these things, we shipped the game around it in January this year, and people seem to really enjoy the concept of creating their own contracts with other players, agreements that game companies do not have to even have considered, right? We don't have to, for example, when we're building the game, we don't have to think about what people actually want to do or like want to agree to each other. You know, some people actually, like some people in our community actually drafted a lot of new types of agreements that just seamlessly incorporate into the game. And that happened, right? And the end game was actually really interesting where I believe there was one alliance that was leading. And by the way, that was the game was week long. So towards the end, there was one alliance that was leading. And then the night before the game's end, right, there was a player that wrote a treaty that basically borrowed armies, borrowed troops from another large player who's not in the alliance, and literally used that extra army to raid the center for a battle royal strategy. And that, you know, the game, the core mechanism treaty completely changed how the game how the game runs compared to any, you know, this thing just would not happen in Web2 strategy games, right? Even in Civilization and the top, you know, Paradox games. And so, and since then we've been, you know, I think that's the moment where we realized, okay, that's a glimpse. I wouldn't even say that's the whole piece of it, but that's at least a glimpse of the truly crypto native game mechanisms that I think, you know, Andy, you probably have been exploring this as well. Like we're all looking for actually crypto native mechanisms that can, you know, drive the next truly, I would say, like mass adoption, not, you know, maybe not like like mass adoption, like hundreds of millions, but more than a couple hundred players in the current space, right? And then and then after treaty, we realized another huge problem, which is that the biggest problem with treaty was that people had to wait tens of seconds for a single battle action to occur. And because blockchain could not support game tick natively, right? You could not update the world, you know, 1/60th of a second. What happens is for every those actions that repeat themselves, you can't even have the system run it for you default, and you have to at least have a block, and that increasingly adds to the performance bottleneck. So since then, we've always been building infra from the beginning, but it's been kind of focused on the limited to the smart contracts. But since then, we have actually taken a pretty radical approach. It's kind of like Starknet in spirit, but I think it's even more radical in the sense that we're basically adding game-specific modules to the EVM, to OP Stack directly. For example, the game tick, we have an enshrined indexer, all of these things in order to solve, as well as precompiles that actually offload a lot of the compute from on-chain to basically in-chain, where it's built in-chain, right? That's you know, it's in our repo keystone that we released last month. But essentially, using a lot of these primitives, we're able to actually start solving the next big problem of on-chain game, which is that yes, you can kind of start building interesting mechanisms, but nobody will play. Like your game cannot run more than 30 people when every person have to wait 10 seconds for a transaction. If your game is complex, even moderately complex, right? Dark Forest is okay with this because their game, you know, action each takes from 15 minutes to several hours, but most games don't. And so I think that's those are the things that we're thinking about. And
yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Ija. It's a very considering and good observation. As a non-game player, I do see game as the entry for like mass adoption for blockchain technology, simply because, you know, growing up in China, I see like Tencent using game to bring like billions of people into quote unquote the internet, right? A lot of people learn about the internet first from little online games. And this is like a easy to daily people sort of approach. And for I think the next question for is for everyone. Hopefully not the last question. We need to be mindful of time. As you know, as builders yourself and as players, you guys are always yearning for great openness, more freedom of combination, and unique narrative structure for games. And that's why, we love playing Zelda. We love playing Minecraft, right? Because in the open world, the goal of playing an open game is to keep the game going instead of winning the game, right? The one strategy to win the game is to keep that game going. And perhaps it's the answer is like for fully on-chain games, I think it's really release the potential of building this sort of a game Lego, which enables like very, very large number of different combinations, and this characteristic really holds a really promising future. So the notion of autonomous world, I know you all more or less contributed to this new notion, is a very powerful philosophical concept that truly encapsulates some of the essence of blockchain technology and uncovers somehow illusionary nature of freedom within the traditional Web2 games. And I think autonomous world as a concept resonates with me in the same way when I first learned about the term metaverse, right? First it gained popularity, but like when time goes by, you see this word sort of like collapsed into a meaningless marketing term. So can five of you tell me, like, what does autonomous world what does that mean in you, in your career, and do you see this as a marketing term, as a philosophical term, and how do you interpret it? How can we prevent this word from being abused, like metaverse? How can we prevent this term becoming uncool?
I feel passionately about this. I can start.
Sure.
It already is kind of becoming a marketing term, which is the real answer, and I'm seeing it thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
But I think all of us on the call here can agree that we all have a shared vision in our minds, and we can look at something and say that is an autonomous world or it is not, or it's like closer to an autonomous world or it's farther from an autonomous world. But I don't think we've seen a full one. And even Dark Forest had like properties of an autonomous world, but it wasn't truly open, right? Like, let's not forget that Dark Forest had a whitelist where a few thousand people were allowed to play. And that's pretty much the only reason the game functioned, because like we weren't able to handle the full scale of everyone who wanted to join. So we're all taking baby steps towards this grand dream. Now, but like, once again, everyone on this call, I think we're all experimenting, right? It's like, we're not just raising money with a word and then going off and then like doing research. Like, we're all doing play tests every week. Like, I see us launching things all the time. We're experimenting. We are reaching out into like other industries to get inspiration for the games that we're making. And then I mean, me personally, I'm a gamer, and if I am not playing a game actively, I'm going to be very, very bored with what I do. That's just the truth. I can't just sit in a room for 2 years working on something that I'm not sure if people are actually going to get access to. So tangibly, what this means at Lattice is like we literally play test every single Friday publicly, but we also I play the game every single day with my brother actually also works at Lattice, and it's like me and my brother, and he's the lead game designer, I'm the lead developer. We play this game every single day, and we talk about, okay, what is the future we want to create? Because we grew up playing online games together, and a lot of those online games that we devoted our lives to no longer exist because the companies that create them decided they don't really make enough money for us. So our dream is, let's create a game that if we want to play it forever, we can play it forever, and no one is going to stop us, and the servers aren't going to get shut down on us. And I firmly believe there's a lot of people in the world like us that think the same way. For example, like old school RuneScape is a perfect example, right? Like this game that came out in 2004. Everyone loved it. Everyone was obsessed with it. I have 10K hours in it, whatever. They shut it down eventually because they're like, well, we have a more profitable direction for the game. Like, this is a much better idea. Suddenly the entire community is up in arms and they stop playing and they cave and they eventually re-released the old game that everyone actually loved. So now there's two parallel universes of this game. There's old school, which is literally like the old code base that didn't have any changes, and they have new school. Now, this is an extreme example because most companies wouldn't do this. They would just continue down their profitable route without listening to the community. But this is just a great example that this essence is already in the gaming community. We're just trying to bring it to the forefront. I think like once we give people the platform to to explore their creativity in this way, like they will just flock to it. And yeah, like there's no teams here, you know, there's no tribes. Like we're all just trying to make a game that people actually play. Like, please make a game that will make me like get a StarkNet wallet. Like I really, if you make a great game, I'll do it. I don't have one yet, I'll be honest. But so yeah, it's like, I don't know. Let's make it real. That's my answer.
Yeah.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, I can talk a bit as well. So I think, yeah, largely agree with Andy. I think there's a couple of things that I want to be specific on. So what I specifically like about the term autonomous worlds is, and I think people can have different interpretations of it, but what really excites me is the fundamental, or like the underlying notion that it's the community who drives the game forward, right? I think that's something that us Web3 games, and especially fully on-chain games, has the ability to do. Now, that's a very that's a goal, but it doesn't state how we get there, right? It might be through governance, it might be through you actually allow people to start tuning parameters in your game first, and then allowing them to more seamlessly launch mods that are actually not separate games like like the previous kind of mods sometimes turn into new separate games, but instead as still part of a larger community, or maybe there's some other way. But I think we just need to be very specific. And on the flip side, right, the thing that I don't really like about the term is, again, it's implied, is it's like, I think some people mindlessly pursue this notion of persistence without understanding what people actually need, right? So if I give you a virtual world, which is really boring, it's completely gray, it has nothing, but I say, okay, you can change, I don't know, you can do something really useless in the virtual world. I'm not going to destroy it. Everything's decentralized. I doubt people will come, right? If that's the product. However, if you say, hey, here's the game where you can, I'll just use the example of treaty, like or social contracts, where it's a fun game. You're able to make different contracts with other people, and maybe the game isn't persistent, or maybe there's a meta layer that's persistent, but the core game isn't, or maybe it's the other way around. In that sense, I think the persistence starts to be more useful. But I really believe that persistence or any sort of long, like people talk about game companies, Web2 game companies not hosting their server forever. I think that's fundamentally tied to their business model of having to release new novel content, right, to engage players, right? Like, as much as keeping old content is good, I doubt that if League of Legends stop, releasing content, they will retain their even 1/4 of their players after a year, right? There's like specific reasons for why this is the way. And I think we as a space just need to really go down and ask, what do players really need, and how we can, are we actually trying to provide persistence? Is that the core of autonomous worlds or on-chain games? Or is this something else? And there might be multiple things, right? I think we just need to be specific. And I definitely think autonomous world at this point it's kind of like the metaverse, right? I think in some ways, all good terms are vague and you can't really disprove it. And at the same time, it's definitely used as a marketing term. And that's just inevitable. We just need as builders, I think we need to build good products.
Yeah. I want to hear Guilty Gonzalo and Tara's opinion about this. Maybe we'll start with this order.
Sure, I don't have much else to add. I'll just say I don't think we can prevent hyping and memification from happening. But I think as builder, we just have to ship. So let's build something fun.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. I think it's been covered pretty well. I'll just say that I think like autonomous worlds is a very aspirational term, and in my opinion, isn't like interchangeable. Shouldn't be used interchangeably with like a fully on-chain game. Like I think an autonomous world is a subset of fully on-chain games that has like a specific set of properties, and in my opinion, like persistence, like while it doesn't make a necessarily an interesting game, is an important property like of an autonomous world, the ability for like any participant in the world to propagate it in time if they're interested in doing so, as well as like maybe like the permissionless expansion of it. And I think probably like the seeds of an autonomous world will be, sown at like a much lower level than like what we're seeing today, where there's still a lot of priors that are embedded in the types of games that we're building. Like it's probably something that'll be more bottoms up, organic, and start from a very fundamental, like kind of lore driven foundation, and then interesting games and mechanics will like be emergent on top of that. So like serve as a foundation for experimentation. But yeah, and yeah, I agree. I think there's probably nothing we can do to prevent people from using it as a marketing term. It's like the sad reality of doing interesting things. I'm sure we'll see it abused a lot in the future.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's not much we can do about that. Yeah, I think the way that I see autonomous worlds is, that they have, I mean, that they're very similar in properties to, L1 chains in a way. Well, in my opinion, they should be. They need to have this level of persistence, and this level of well, you need to know, if you're going to interact with this world, is the code going to run forever, or can you spin up a node and can you run the code, and it's going to work. And that's why we're all here, is because we're all building on this on Ethereum, and that's its properties, is that we know the code on it is going to execute no matter what, and all the thousands of nodes running it back that up. So I think at a fundamental level, autonomous worlds need to have that at least. And one of the things we're experimenting with, we went through a lot of different design cycles for our game Eternum, and yeah, I think it's so hard to like persistent games are just inevitably going to be incredibly complex, but you can't start at the complexity. Like you need to start at like the primitive layer and just have a very basic subset of rules that define like the opening error of it to a degree, and then let an equilibrium form within the world, and then from that complexity can grow. I mean, it's like you can't like I like the way that I see it is like the natural world didn't start off just like in equilibrium, right? It started off as like chaotic, and equilibrium forms in every ecosystem. And so I see a true autonomous world having the same kind of properties. It starts off very, very low level physics, like almost minimal level physics, and then from that it expands. But yeah, no, it's an incredibly exciting idea, and it's a pleasure watching everybody on this call experiment every week. This is definitely the most exciting, by far the most exciting part of crypto right now.
Totally. I think we have 6 minutes to go, and I do want to encapsulate 2 questions into quickly into sort of merging to one. One would be, I'm not sure if this resonates with you, but my observation is on-chain gamers often experience a deeper, more engaged connection with autonomous worlds game due to one, this intensified of ownership of in-game assets and achievements, and second, the increased motivation to master the game in order to secure those high-value assets and prestigious titles. So based on this observation, you cannot, yes, you can shake your head. What's like one thing you have observed from gamers that's out of your expectation, and then maybe you'll cut yourself feeling blissful, maybe you catch yourself feeling surprised. And another is very short, how would you see AI's role playing in autonomous world in the future? And I'll start with Yijia, I guess.
Sure. I'll answer the AI question because I have to think about the first one a bit. I think there's a ton of use cases for AI. For example, right, if one of the most difficult parts of any user-generated content-based applications, whether it's on-chain games or others, is the barrier to creating content, right? You can't expect, in fact, in most Web2 games, even like for let's say Zelda, right? People who actually build a rocket ship with the little pieces in Zelda is like 1% or less than 1% of the total players. Most players just achieve the tasks, but then AI, what AI does, AI is a productivity tool. It's able to lower the barrier of creating user-generated content by 100x or more, right? In the future, let's say, continue to use Zelda example. I want to build a rocket ship using the Zonai devices, using like which ones, maybe you specify. And you just use natural language to piece things together, as opposed to writing whether it's Solidity or Cairo smart contract. I think it's 100 times easier. And that's really, I think, when AI is meaningfully integrated into an already good product that us, the on-chain game nerds enjoy. I think that's the moment when our space goes from, a very niche but exciting space in crypto to mass adoption. And then, yeah, I'll think about the first question and other people can go.
Yeah, sure. How about Guilty Galza?
I think so we're making this game called Shoshin. It's a fighting game where you make agents and strategies. And I think when the front end is open source, some people will come in and integrate GPT-4. But right now we're not providing we're not providing any machine learning stuff. We're just keeping things simple. Yeah, that's all I wanted to share.
To answer the first question you asked, like what was the most surprising thing that I saw players do? So we launched an experiment called OPCraft, which was, Minecraft clone on chain. Every block you built was a transaction. And the only other primitive in the game was you could claim territory with diamonds. So you would go and find diamonds, you'd claim territory with those diamonds. That's it. That's all we provided. And if you claimed territory, you owned it and you could do whatever you wanted with it. And you could give permission to other people to build on it. Game was going smoothly, whatever. People were claiming small patches of territory. Suddenly, like 3 days in, someone had mined, I think, like 80,000 diamonds, claimed the entire world, and declared dictatorship over the world and said, I am the autonomous leader of OPCraft. You now all have to bow down to me. And they launched a smart contract where you could pledge all of your material possessions to that leader. And you could literally only play the game from that point forward if you had pledged allegiance to this person. And yeah, we didn't build any of that. We didn't intend for that to happen. And that was all allowed within the smart contract. And there was even a client-side plugin that made it very easy for people to pledge their allegiance and give all of their material possessions to them. So that was incredible, and that was like a really inspiring moment for me. It's like, wow, okay, like this was only running for a week and someone was able to build that. What are we going to see when this is more permanent?
Yeah, communism achieved on chain.
Yeah,
that was definitely a moment. Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if in the future we're like a gaming historian, write about on-chain games. I think that would be a chapter in like can analyze from like so many socio-political perspectives. Okay, I think Love and Terrace, you want to share?
Yeah, I think that emergent behavior is like what's like that's the core property of what we're trying to do, right? It's just like you give these open tools. You never know. I mean, you never know what a game is going to do. I mean, some of the crazy stuff people are building in Zelda. Do you reckon the developers thought of that? That's like Zelda's like the perfect example of this. It's like the perfect game because there's no win. There's a million different things you can do and a million different ways you can solve the problem. It's genius, and that's what we're all trying to do is just like build these little building blocks, just let something emerge, and who knows. That's what's exciting. In terms of AI, yeah, it's. I mean, I want to see it. I mean, Guilty's actually been exploring this for like a year and a half, like before even GPT. He's been pushing this whole agent idea of agents within games, because it just gives you, like, instead of just having a few inputs, you just have you create the agent and the agent does the thing. And there's I think there's huge design scope there in designing your agent to play these games, because, well, yeah, it's a whole new like input vector really, to play these games. And then you obviously have the generative AI stuff, which is like, people could just think a client into existence in a matter of 10 minutes in the future. So yeah, that's really exciting. It just kind of lowers the barrier of content creation, but soon it'll just lower the barrier of like client creation. Like you'd be able to create a whole new like you give it a JSON interface or something, and it just creates a whole new interface for you around that game. And because everything's on chain, all these games, they're all headless. There can be hundreds of clients all interacting with the same game. So yeah, that's really exciting to me.
Well, and briefly coming back and talk about the surprise. It's actually just the raiding with other people's army and winning the game piece that I talked about before. And the surprise there is that the larger surprise there is that we launched Treaty with the like smart contract Treaty component in there, thinking that people will just play with it and not much significant. But actually, that just dictated the end result of the game, and that basically ramped up our confidence to put Treaty and this design of social building blocks front and center at the core of our games in the future, as opposed to the periphery, and keeping exploring the crypto native interactions and dynamics.
Okay, so Terrence, want to wrap up?
Cool. Yeah, I'll keep it quick because I think we're at time here. But yeah, I mean, I think like one of the more surprising things has just been like how these having this like credibly neutral open ecosystem, it just serves as a magnet to attract so many talented people, that it would be incredibly hard to like go out and explicitly find yourself, and they just kind of like find their way into the ecosystem and bring incredible talents and are willing to kind of, for the passion of the project, just donate those, like participate in the community and contribute to it in capacities that would be really hard to replicate in like a more traditional private organization. I think like seeing that has been like a very powerful realization. And then the AI thing, yeah, I think I agree with everyone here. I think like on-chain games or autonomous worlds are kind of like the perfect medium to kind of supercharge this kind of the current trajectory towards like games that incorporate a lot of user-generated content, and with AI making it significantly more accessible, and the blockchain allowing you to like have these platforms to deploy your ideas to in a way where you have payment rails and all these kind of things built in, and you don't have to host backend infrastructure yourself, for example. I think it's going to be a powerful intersection of two like amazing new technologies.
All right, thank you so much for guys attending ETHShanghai and attending this on-chain game panel. Such an honor to host this session and witnessing you guys exploring this super exciting frontier. Yeah, and I hope you guys can build amazing games and you enjoy playing.
Thanks, Afra.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.